I'm a little bit at a loss for words today. I felt compelled to kind of set my prepared comments aside because of what's happened over the weekend, and chose instead personally to focus on this beautiful text from Psalm 46, the one I read earlier. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar in foam, though the mountains tremble with tumult. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. You know, occasionally in my life, there are persons who appear whom I would describe as giants along my path. And there are several in this congregation. One happened to be Jim Marsh, who in many ways lived as a larger-than-life figure for many of us. Another one who isn't present today is Otis Maxfield, and Jenny is here. Jenny and Otis will be leaving, going back to Maine tomorrow, and Otis is struggling with his health, but he is one of those giants along my path, and I want to remind him of that. And then there are other giants who aren't physically giants in stature, but they're like little giants, like Nell Gentry. She was a spiritual giant in her own right. And I think all of these people represent what I consider to be the heart and soul of this great chapel. Last week I usually only hear the good stuff after I'm done preaching. I got a letter from an out-of-state visitor, someone who stumbled in here, and she said, "Well, I'll pray for you. I rather liked your service, but the sermon, the homily, was a little marginal." She said, we didn't say it exactly like that, but more or less. The thing I didn't like about the sermon was you didn't talk about Jesus enough. Well, I think this is a Christ-centered chapel, and I think I'm a Christ-centered minister, as was Jim Marsh. I think the difference lies in the fact that our understanding of who Jesus was and who the Christ can be in our world today is radically different than those who consider themselves to be the real Christians, many of them. What I try to represent to the world, and I think what Jim Marsh tried to represent to the world, was an all-embracing Christ. Not an exclusive Christ. One who embraced all faiths, who embraced all people in all the seasons of their life. And so we like to say here at this chapel, wherever you find yourself in your spiritual journey, you're welcome and you're accepted. So I'm thinking of that legacy in particular that people like Nell left behind and that Jim Marsh left behind, because it's that foundation upon which I stand and you stand, and it's that foundation which has made this a great church with a great future. So having said that, I'm just ruminating on Psalm 46. And this psalm speaks of the true source, the true strength of the human experience. And as I try to process all that's happened in the last 48 hours in the life of this congregation, I'm reminded that there are at least 3 doorways that lead to the heart of God. The first doorway is silence. The second doorway is joy. And the third doorway, and maybe the most direct and the deepest doorway, is grief. Silence, joy, and grief. Now, I've talked about silence before and the importance of the contemplative life, and as the psalmist said here in verse 10, "Be ye still and know that I am God." And that doorway to God is a beautiful doorway. It's the life of meditation, contemplation, and prayer, and listening to the voice of God. And it takes us to a very deep place. It's not an easy place, because when we really start to meditate and quiet ourselves and focus our thoughts and minds and hearts on this divine indwelling presence, things start to bubble up to the surface. Things start to happen, and we always have things to deal with. And it can be like a spiritual battle. But it's a beautiful doorway to God, the silence. And people approach that door in different ways. For Nell, it was sitting quietly in that lovely little chapel with Bill every Sunday morning, sharing in the communion cup so faithfully, listening to God. And for Jim, it was out in the Gulf or out in the bay on his sailboat, listening to God speak through the wind, and that gentle tapping of the halyard against the mast. That was his meditation. That was his lullaby. But it was all the same. The speaking voice of God coming through the thin silence. That's a doorway to God. And